Hello, everyone. I am Ilia and I am a child and family psychologist, and I'm the psychology lead at Komodo. So, in my role, I work with schools all over the world to make use of their school wellbeing data and actually get them to use the data to drive meaningful wellbeing interventions.
Hi everyone, my name is Jade and here at Intellischool, my role is the Education Specialist, which is a fancy way of saying that I'm the resident teacher. So I come from a background in classroom teaching, school leadership, in both pastoral and academic roles. So I am really lucky to work directly with our Intellischool subscribing schools about how to make most effective use of the data that's at their fingertips. And we're really particularly excited to get working with Komodo to be able to leverage the combination of that wellbeing data as well as the academic and pastoral data.
I think from a Komodo side of things, we are forever hearing that teachers have more and more responsibilities and no more extra time in the day to complete those responsibilities and roles. So with Komodo, they are able to streamline their decision making as to which students need their support when it comes to wellbeing. It kind of, I suppose, takes the guesswork out of what students need my attention now. Obviously, we would love if teachers had the time capacity to be able to engage with all of their students, but we know that's not the reality. So giving them a platform that can kind of streamline that process, highlight which students are most in need, whether that's by their own individual requests or whether it's the software saying, hey, this student is struggling in this area, it's worth a check-in. So I think, yeah, for me, it's about streamlining a process and actually making it far more time efficient as well for teachers when we know they're really, really busy.
For me, I completely agree with you, Isla. It's all about that time, isn't it? Time is always the challenge for teachers, and I know that very well firsthand. So from the Intellischool perspective, it's really similar. It's about centralizing data. It's about making it more accessible. So it's often such a pain for teachers to track down not only individual pieces of data, but especially when it comes to comparing data sets that would lead them to useful insights that can have a real impact on how students are growing, particularly post-pandemic. So by bringing together a bunch of those different separate data sets, not only in one place, but especially in a place that they're already familiar, that they use every day. So in our case, that's their learning management system. I think it really helps to reduce that mental load that's normally needed for teachers to find the data, and then it gives them a bit more headspace to actually get into the nuts and bolts of the data and then how it can help them and their students. First and foremost, I would say students are benefiting thanks to their teachers having better access to the combination of data that can help them to improve their outcomes. And that's especially why we're so excited to be working with Komodo. It's so important to be able to compare the likes of the wellbeing data, have a look if there's anything that strikes a chord as far as that academic data is concerned as well. So having all of the data sets in one place means that teachers can act sooner rather than later, rather than having to act retroactively. Then they've got a better chance of seeing positive improvement in areas of concern, and especially for those kids who might need extension as well. So when I work with schools, we often have discussions around how teachers can bring the students along on the data journey as well, how to give them some more ownership and agency over their own data. Particularly with secondary students, I've encouraged teachers to take the information that's available for each individual student in our learner profile. And I think it would be great for teachers to sit one-on-one with the students to show them through their areas of strength and challenge, use that as a springboard for conversations to see how they can continue to grow.
I really like that. That's actually very similar to what I was going to say in around, we always hear from our schools how they're getting their students to own their data and do something with it. So we hear about schools starting wellbeing councils, having student wellbeing leaders who get up in assembly, and it's all from what they're learning about their own wellbeing through their own data. So you're right, there's one part of it which is they get teachers who are far more efficient and effective and without the mental load, but they also are building their own awareness and knowledge in a data space. And I think, yeah, it's probably one of the most exciting parts of the job is hearing about how students are actually bringing this to life and what they're able to do. I think the other thing I was thinking as you were talking with Komodo, we know that there's so much stigma, I suppose, with reaching out for help. And one of the things they can do through the platform is kind of virtually put up their hand and say, hey, teacher, I need help and I need it now. And I think being able to, similar to what you were saying, Jade, meet them on a platform that is familiar, it's on technology, it's not a person-to-person conversation to start with. It's actually just, I'm going to send a notification, I'm going to put my hand up and say I need help, and teachers are able to respond to that virtually or engage in that kind of person-to-person contact if they need to. So yeah, I'm excited to see what Intellischool and Komodo can do together.
And I'm putting back my homeroom teacher hat on, and I'm thinking about that idea that I know that I had so many students in my homeroom, particularly during COVID online learning, that just really lost that confidence to speak up about different things. So I think having the option to be able to put up a virtual hand and say, I do really need that extra support. And then for the teacher to make the decision based on what they know about the student to be able to respond, it's excellent. Just to give students options about how they want to interact and how they can reach out and ask for help. So it's all such exciting stuff.
I think what you said there around COVID plays a really important part for both of our two platforms. Like, data has become so much more important because being able to see a student in a classroom just disappeared literally overnight. And so we were forced to look at data, but not necessarily teachers or anyone within the kind of school network didn't have all the processes in place or didn't have the knowledge and awareness. And I think once you see it in schools, right, when they get their data and they really understand it, you hear the stories of, such and such a student, we would have never picked that they needed support, but their data showed this. And so we intervened before we ever would have. Or they get a student who they thought was disruptive, but actually they've come out and said, hey, this is going on at home during lockdown. And it's like, it all makes sense. I just think COVID was so difficult for so many reasons, but it was so amazing for us to come through the other side and think data is so important and we can continue to use it beyond post-pandemic.
It's that silver lining, isn't it? That we were all forced, I suppose, to adapt to the circumstances at the time. But I do think, like you said, we've come out of it on the other side with such a better understanding of just how important and powerful this data, particularly the combination of different types of data, can be. So this is why this partnership is so important.
We've got to triangulate. We've got to build that safety net around the students.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think from a psychology perspective, evidence-based intervention is gold standard. So in that respect, knowledge is power, and knowledge is what can drive an effective intervention. It's not only about interventions though, it's about casting that safety net, I suppose, around students. So they may not need the help now, but we're building this cumulative data, this context to understand if they do need help, we've got all the pieces, or at least most of the pieces of the puzzle, to be able to do something meaningful with that. I think the flip side of it though is it's not always that deficit model. It actually works both ways in that we can understand where students really thrive and where they do really well. And then, we always use a kind of positive psychology lens where we can in our product. And so it's like, how do we use these strengths that we've identified to pull up some of those difficulty areas? How do we use all these different bits of data to enhance what a student is capable of, rather than it always being that kind of deficit model? We can also use this to kind of parachute our students forward in what they're capable of doing and reaching that full potential.
I'm really glad you mentioned, Ilia, that idea of there's often the focus on the deficit model, right? There's often the focus on the negatives. But I think that there is so much potential through combining the data that's available in Komodo and Intellischool to look for positives and continue to celebrate, embrace, and grow on those positives as well. So from my perspective, again, having come from the classroom, both homeroom teacher, looking at leadership roles, I think that the real power behind having the combination of this data is uncovering insights that might not have previously been uncovered, where there is a connection between students' wellbeing, how they're doing. And again, I know we speak about COVID often, but that's for a good reason. There was so many really unfortunate impacts of COVID on a number of students that I taught. So to be able to be really in tune with how they're feeling, what's going on for them as far as wellbeing is concerned, and to use that to make sure that the way that we support these students in the classroom is creating the best possible environment for them. Even like you said, Ilia, as well, about that idea of safety net, making sure that students feel safe and ready to learn. Of course, teachers have so much tacit knowledge about the kids that they teach, particularly if they're students that they see numerous times a week. I'm thinking of primary teachers as well, who see these kids in and out for hours every day. They know them so very well. So it's not necessarily that they might not have ever uncovered these insights, but again, it's about timeliness. It's about being able to realize these patterns, these trends sooner rather than later, and then being able to act sooner, and ultimately making sure that that information is used to help the student thrive at school. So that's really the bottom line. And then, of course, like we were discussing earlier, the idea of bringing students along on their data journey, that's where I see a real benefit in combining the academic, pastoral, wellbeing data. It's helping students to become more self-reflective, I would suggest, is that if they are understanding really well what's going on in their own data, they can start to identify their own trends, particularly for some of the older students. So it does depend on the age and maturity, I would suggest. But for teachers to be able to bring students into that conversation, how excellent is that? Because it does mean that as they go forward into life, into years beyond school, that they're so much better equipped to understand themselves as people, themselves as learners, and to, again, make sure that they head in the path that's going to see them succeed.
Yeah, I think as you were talking there, I had this light bulb moment, is gathering all this data isn't just to add to workload to teachers by any means. It is actually to make things easier, and also to hand some of the responsibility to students, particularly, like you said, those older students. I was just thinking, we had one student describe to us what Komodo had done for his well-being. And I just thought it was the most beautiful metaphor that this high school student said to us. He said, Komodo gave me a two-way bridge to my well-being, one between me and to my teacher, and then one from myself to myself, to understand what is going on for me. And I was like, for a 16-year-old student to come out and say that, I mean, like, that's job done. That's what you want, right? You want a student to be that wrapped up in their data, that have that much understanding of what they can do with it. And that's how we see that sustained, meaningful change. And like you said, that's where our students then leave school, go off, be wonderful people, and are absolutely thriving.
Oh, it's so validating to be able to see that kind of real feedback from students, even from teachers, to hear the real impact that these platforms are having on their day-to-day, because we know firsthand just how difficult, I suppose, being a student can be in the current day and age, and also being a teacher. So any kind of feedback like that is just so incredibly rewarding to hear.